Hello YouTube, welcome back to our Next.js series. Today we are going to create the API endpoints for those two screens. On the left we have a user profile screen and on the right we have vehicles owned by a specific user. So focusing on the left screen, we can see that when the application loads we will need to have an endpoint to get that data. So we will have something like /API/person/ID. Then, after a while, we will edit that information in the form and click on Save Changes. Doing that, we will need a put endpoint because we are updating that user. If you don't know what those get, post, put, delete verbs are, I will leave a link in the description for you. Then lastly, we can use an endpoint to get all the users that we have in the database. And if we want to do that, we will need to have an endpoint like /API/people, and it's also a get. Then on the second page, we will need to have an endpoint to get all the vehicles. After that, if we click in one of the vehicles, we need to get the vehicles by ID. And lastly, if we want to get only the vehicles from a specific person, we can opt for two different variations. The first one, we can use the endpoint that we created in the previous screen, /person/ID, and one of the properties will be the array of vehicles. But imagine that that array of vehicles is really big, let's say 200 vehicles, and you never use that array except on this specific screen. So you are sending back and forward a lot of data between your server and your client that is never used. So in order to optimize that a bit, it will be nice that our user endpoint or /person endpoint only sends the information that we really need for the user, like the name, the email, etc. But we don't send vehicles. When we need to get the vehicles, we can have /API/person/ID/vehicles. And in that moment, yes, we send all the vehicles from that user. This is just a slight optimization, okay? Then how are we going to achieve this? Well, initially, we will create all the endpoints, so all the API routes will be created initially. Secondly, we will create a database using SQLite. And the last point is to make those two work together, our routes and our SQLite. And you may be asking, why are we going to use SQLite? Well, one of the requirements I have when I created this channel is that everybody should be able to follow along with only two commands, git clone and npm install. And they shouldn't need to install any external dependencies. And if we go to use MongoDB or SQL Server or Oracle, I will force people to install a dependency, which is something that I would like to avoid. Then most people also understand SQL, even if you are using MongoDB, most probably you know a bit about SQL. And the same is not true about people that know SQL. Not everybody will know MongoDB. So it's a way to keep everybody on the same page. We will use normal SQL, okay? So let's now jump into VS Code. Now that we are inside VS Code, we just need to follow three rules. The first one is that our APIs need to be inside /pages/API, so we create an API folder. After that, the second rule is that every single file that we will have inside APIs, it will become an API route. So one of the ones we need is /vehicles. So let's create a file called vehicles.ts. And now we need to export a function. And this default here is important. If we don't export it as default, Next.js will not be able to recognize this as a function in order to be called. So we just name now this function as get all vehicles, for example, and because we are exporting it as default, this name really doesn't matter. It's just for us to read it and understand what's going on. Now, this function has two parameters. One is the request and the other one is the response. If you ever did Node.js, for example, you are probably used to those two. And Next.js provides us with some typings. Okay, so we can come here and do next API request and next API response. And using those two, API response over here, okay, we can see that one of the methods that exist for the response is of type JSON. So let's just for start to say hello world, for example, okay? And let me just add one more thing to give you an example. in a second. So let's put this method, and this method is nothing more, nothing less than the HTTP verbs we spoke 5 minutes ago. So you will have the get, the post, the put, the delete, etc. Okay, so saving this one, we can go to our browser, and in our browser let's open /API/vehicles, and opening this one you can see that we received our hello world as we were expecting, and we have a method get. So let me just show you something here. So if we have this one, await fetch API vehicles, and I create it as a post, okay, let's see what happens. r.json. So now this API endpoint also replied to a post. If you don't want this to happen, we can just come here and do the following. If rec.method different than get, okay, then we can do res.status. Oops, let's say the status is a 500 internal server error. We can use a better one if we want to, and let's say that the JSON that we are going to return will be of type message, and we say instead of hello world, let's put a proper message. Sorry, we only accept get requests. Okay, so if we go back to our browser after we save, we can just say R2 because we are using consts, and if we do this now, we should receive a 500, and we did receive a 500. So coming here to our network and opening this one, we can see that we received a sorry, we only accept get requests. Okay, so if we come here and we do an R3 and say the method is just a get, it should just work as before. So doing await r3.json should return the message that we expect. So this one is good. So which other endpoints do we need apart from vehicles? We will need one endpoint called /vehicle/id. So let's create a folder over here called vehicle, vehicle, and inside this vehicle, let's put an id.ts. And if you don't remember from the first video from this series, those square brackets in id are telling Next.js that we will have a dynamic routing parameter. So the same thing applies here. So I can just copy paste this one, and from now on I will not validate for the methods just to be faster to show to you. Okay, so in this one we have a get vehicle by id. Okay, and we can say by id and say that the id that we received, it's rec.query.id, and this id over here matches the id that we have in that file name. So this seems okay. We can remove this method now and just say a message like, a message like the name of the function, for example. Okay, so if we go back to our browser, we should be able to see /vehicle12345 or 12346, and we received exactly what we were expecting. So our second endpoint is also done. Let's go now to the people, and we can have a file called people.ts, okay? And we can just copy from our vehicles. Let's just remove this validation because we don't need that one for now. Get all people or get people, get people. And in this one, we can just send an array of two names. For example, name Bruno and name another person name Jake. I don't even know if that name exists. Good enough for now, right? So if we do people over here, you see that we are starting to receive those two people that you expected. So that one is also good. The last one, well, not the last one, we will need two more. So let's create a folder called /person, okay? And we will do exactly the same thing we did for vehicle. The first one that we need is person/id, and the second one is person/id/vehicles to get all the vehicles of that user. So you have two ways to do this one, or you can create here a file called id.ts, okay, which is okay, and you just have the person/id over here, or you can just have a folder called id, okay, and then inside that folder.id you have an index.ts file and a vehicles file. Oops, my bad, and a vehicles file. Okay, so for now, let's delete this one. Okay, oops, delete this one. And now we will have a /person/id, which is our index.ts. You can think of it like if you do mywebsite.com, by default you will go to /index.html. It's the same thing over here, okay? But in this case it's a TypeScript file. So let's just copy this one, put it over there, and call it getPersonById. We can copy this function. Oops, I copied the wrong thing. Put it over there, okay? And the last one we need to do is copy paste this one, and we can say get all vehicles by person ID or something like that, person ID, some name. So let's just make this one, and we can use the exact same thing. So let's test these two endpoints, and if these two endpoints are working, we can jump directly to the database. So person/id, which is 555, for example. Okay, so we have the get person by ID, and if we do 555/vehicles, okay, we should have a get all vehicles person ID. We can change this ID, so for example 777, and as you can see we have that one over there, right? So the next step we need to do is to npm install, and let's install SQLite. So we will do SQLite, okay, and let's also install npm install --save dev types /SQLite. I will come back to you when this finishes. So the npm install is now finished, and I have great news. We don't need to install @types /SQLite because SQLite itself already comes with typings out of the box. So going to the documentation of SQLite, we can see that they provide us with some migrations that we can use. So we will use something similar to this, where we provide a tier up and a tier down when we want to migrate to a next version of the database. So let's start by, oops, not this one, this one. Let's start by collapsing everything, create a new folder called migrations, okay? And now let's create a file 001 helloworld.sql, okay? And now what we need to do is this up and this down, okay? And start to say create table person, for example, and we will have an ID, which is an integer. This is a primary key auto increment, okay? And why auto increment? Because we want every time that we create a new person that the ID just increases automatically without we having to do anything. The next thing is the person usually has a name, and the type of the name is usually a text. After the name, we can say that the user has an email, and we can put more and more properties over here, but for the sake of the demo, probably we don't need to put any more properties. The next table we are going to create is the vehicle table, and we can copy exactly the same idea from here, okay? And the next thing is that a car usually has a brand, which is of type text. It has a model, which is of type text. And in our case, it has an owner ID. And that owner ID is an integer. And it's a foreign key, okay, that references, oops, I have a typo, references person ID, okay? And so having this now, it's probably enough for us to create the person and the vehicle. So let's just drop this table person on the tier down and drop the table vehicle on the tier down. Now we need to test that we are doing something proper, right? So let's say that we create a file called database test.js. It's a good name. So we will have SQLite equals to require SQLite, okay? And now because we are going to work a lot with asynchronous code, it's just easier if we call a function asynchronous, okay? And we just do this, because now I can play with the await and async inside this function. So we will have a DB and we will do SQLite, and we need an await over here. And which name do we want to give to our database? Let's call it mydb.SQLite. Okay, I would say it's a good name. So now we need to migrate our database. So we will do migrate and force and last. I'm not sure if it's last or latest. Let me just check in the documentation they have here. Force last. Okay, force last. That's the way we force it to migrate to the latest versions. Okay. If you have an application in production, probably don't want to do this line, but in development, it's nice to force your application to just migrate to the latest version of your database. And now that we have this, we can probably run this file and see if we get any errors. So let's just run this file. So database test.js, and running that, oh, we don't need the foreign probably. Oops, open. So we don't need this bit, which is great. We just need probably the references too. Let's just check if that's the case. Yes, that's the case. So we just need the reference and it will assume automatically that's a foreign key. So now we can insert some values. Insert into person values. Oops, we need to say name and email. And let's say the names are Bruno, and by the way, this email doesn't exist. Don't send emails there. So let's say that I have that user and I have another person, which can be called, I don't know, Jack at, well, my name is good. Okay. So let's say that we do now insert somebody over here. So now we create a model and we can have an owner ID. We say values, and let's say that the brand is an Audi R8 and we will assign it to me. So now I have an Audi R8. So let's just assign a vehicle. So a Mercedes-Benz to this second person, Jack. Okay, so let's just see if the application still runs. Okay, it still runs. So now we can just go here to our database test and do something like db.get, or in our case we want all. Okay, so we can do select star from person. Okay, and let's just do const people equals to await of the head. Okay, and let's say that we do a console log of all people, and we will do people like that. Okay, let's even do this look nicer, stringify, and let's do the trick we do all the time over here in the channel. So let's see how it looks like. If it works, then we can do the same for the vehicle. And yes, we can see all the people that exist in the database. So let's just do a copy paste of this one and do the same thing for vehicle and vehicle and vehicles. We can copy this one and say all vehicles, right? So now we can even have this running before our Next.js application. So if we have this running before our Next.js application, we can even make sure that everything from our setup, let's say, worked, and that we have all the people and all the vehicles, and you can see that one vehicle is Audi R8, the other one is a Mercedes-Benz, and the first one is assigned to me, the second one is assigned to Jack. Okay, so let's just make this script run before our Next.js application. So come here and do node /dot, and how did I call it? Database test.js. We can even call it database setup, probably is better, but it's already called database test, so let's keep it as is. And now that we have that, every time that we run our application, let's say that we do a clear of the console and do npm run dev. Okay, we should run that command first, and oops, I think I put it in the wrong place. Did I? Yes, I did it in the wrong place. My bad, I'm sorry. So Let's now do an npm run dev, and we should run our setup. Yes, we run our setup, and now we are starting to run next. Okay, so what is the next step? The next step is for us to go inside our application, okay, and start to go to simple places like, for example, /vehicles, and replace the code we have over there, which is just hard-coded response.json, and start to change it to have response.json of our db.all select star from vehicles, for example. The same for people. Then we can start to put where clauses and do everything. So the first endpoint that we can start to migrate is, for example, the people endpoint, because it's a simple one. So let's just copy this bit over here, open people's endpoint, and start by importing SQLite from SQLite. Oops, another typo, Bruno. Good job. And we will make this function async, okay? And now that we made that function async, we can say db equals to dead, and const people equals to db.all of select star from person, okay? And having these people over here, we just need to pass it to the JSON over there. So everything seems to be fine. Let's just go to our localhost 3000. Oops, I think it's not running. Yes, it is not running. So let's make it run, and hopefully we will see our setup initially. So we saw our setup, everything seems to be fine. So we can do API/people. It's our first endpoint. And now, oops, what happened? We need an await over here, okay? Because all returns a promise as well, so we need to await for that one. So refreshing that one, we get the 2 people in our database. So our first endpoint is done. Let's go to the vehicles one, which is really similar to this one. Let's just copy this because it's really simple. So if we don't care about this anymore, I will just delete this, but in a real application, keep this if over there because it's probably important. You don't want to give the false impression to someone that they can post over your API, and in reality, it was just a get, right? So in this one, let's just say vehicle, okay? And make this a vehicle. So copy paste and get all vehicles, okay? When we save this one and we go back to our browser, we can now say vehicles, and now we receive all the vehicles in our database. So the second endpoint is migrated. Let's go by ID. So where do we have our vehicles by ID? We have our vehicles by ID over here. Let's just copy the internals because the internals is the nicest thing and the hardest thing to do as well. So we have that one. So let's import SQLite. Oops, I have one L too much. From SQLite, okay? Make this function async as well. And now we can delete this one. And what do we want from this one? This one, we just want to do a where the vehicle ID is our parameter. So let's do where ID equals to a parameter, okay? So we can do rec.query.id, okay? And so with this, let's do a paste. So everything seems to be nice. We are doing a select, we are doing where, and we are passing a parameter over there. And that parameter will be our request query.id. So going back to our browser and doing /vehicle/1, for example, we should receive our Audi R8. So this is good. The only thing is we are receiving an array. So we can just change this from all to get. And if I'm not mistaken, now we should receive just a normal object. And yes, we do. Now we receive just the object, which is great. Going back to our person, we can just again, copy these, go to our person, and on the person/ID, we can do something really similar. And so let's delete this one. Let's say person, and let's say that over here is person, where ID equals to the ID. Let's make this function asynchronous as well. does Visual Studio import? No, we need to import it manually, but it's okay. So Control V, save, and we will pass a person over there. So we can save this one. And now if we do person/1, you should receive Bruno. So it's okay, it's working as well. And the next one that we can do is Bruno/vehicles, and we will get all the vehicles that are from Bruno. So let's do again the same thing. We can just copy paste this one. Okay, and probably this bit over here, if this was a real application, we should extract this bit of logic, because if the name of our database changes, you are seeing how many places we already need to change that one. But for the demo, it's probably okay to do this copy paste everywhere. Okay. So import SQLite from SQLite. Now let's delete this one. And what we want to do in this one is we want to go to the vehicle, and we need to change this to all, where ID, and in this case is not the ID, I think we called it owner ID, will be that thing. Let me just check that we called it an owner ID. Oh, not over there. Where are our migrations? They are here. Okay. Let me just check that we called it owner ID. Yes, it was owner ID. So we are doing it correctly. Oops, let's go here. So we are doing that correctly, is owner ID. Okay, Control C, Control V to be safe. So we can call it all vehicles, and all vehicles from that user, not all vehicles of all vehicles, right? So just to make this a bit more interesting, we can go to our migration, and in our migration we can just add one more vehicle to be part of Bruno. So let's say that Bruno now has an Audi R, I don't even know if this car exists, R6, probably doesn't exist, but it's fine for now. So let's just kill our server, force the application to run again, and now we have two cars for Bruno, okay, which is good, an R8 and an R6. So going back to our browser and doing /person/1, which is me, /vehicles, we should now receive two vehicles, and we do. We receive the R8 and the R6. If we go to the second person, we should receive only one vehicle. So the second person, which is Jack, we receive only one vehicle. So everything seems to be working correctly at the moment. So the only thing that you may want to do, I don't even know if you really want to do, but that you may want to do is probably in the vehicle, you can do some kind of group by, inner join, just to show the username and the user ID. For example, instead of showing only the ID, you show the name and the ID. For now, let's keep it out of the way. And the last thing we need to do, let's just close all of this, is to go to our people/ID, and we will need to create the put for this method. We already have the get, but when we save changes, we need to execute a put to our server. So in order to do that, we already saw that we have request.method. So we can have request.method if it is a put. Now we are going to do the following: create a statement, and to create a statement we do db.prepare, and in our case we update the table person, we set the name equals to the first parameter, we set the email equals to the second parameter, where ID equals to the third parameter. Now, oops, we need to put an await over here. Now we can say const result equals to statement.run, and we will start to pass the parameters. And because this is a put, the name and the email will come from our body. So we can do request.body.email, request.body.name, and request.header.id. Okay, not header, I'm sorry, query.id. And actually I exchanged the order. We have name, email first, okay? And so every single one of those will match to the first question mark over here. This one will match the second question mark, and this one will match the third question mark. The last thing we need to do is result.finalize, and I missed another await over here. Okay, so now we don't need that. If we format, we have this code. And the funny thing now is we need to return to our user the newly updated result. But because we already have the get in the same exact method, we don't even need to change anything. We will just get again from the database that specific user, and because it's already updated, we just return the updated user to our front end. So that's looking good. Let's see first if the application still works with the get. This one is running, so let's go to our browser and let's see if the application is still working with person/2, for example, and we should have Jack. And okay, yeah, we still have Jack. So let me just go here and do fetch post, okay? And let's just copy this from MDN is probably the easiest way, because we need to set the content and we need to set the body. So let me just copy this and change it slightly. So opening here, so we don't need any of those. We can change this one to be a put, okay? The URL is this URL, okay? So now we can delete all of these, we can delete these, we can delete all of these. And let's say that our new values for name will be our new value. And the email will be new at, oops, we need new at pt.pt. I don't know, that thing probably doesn't even exist. So let's say that we have this. We are doing a put. We need to specify when we use fetch what is the type of our body. In this case, it will be a content type of application JSON, and then the body will be that object. So running this one, what happened? Await is only valid in an async function. Oops, I forgot to put this thing over there to close the string. So now doing this, and we need to call it something else. Okay, we now get our resp. So we can do resp.json, okay? And the resp.json, we can even see that it updated. So if I refresh, you will see that here as well, we'll have our new values. So let me refresh. And as you can see, the name is our new value and the email is also new at pt.pt. So this finalizes our tutorial. We learned how to do get, we learned how to do put, and a put and a post will be really similar, so it's okay. We connected our routes to a database. We also did some bridge between our first video ever in this series about routing. The routing that time was for pages, now it's the routing for API. But as you saw, they work exactly the same way. So I really hope that you enjoyed this one. Subscribe to the channel and I see you next week again. Bye bye!